Hey everybody, we're going to practice a few lovely stretches for our kind of glute hip areas, as well as a little bit of the hamstrings as well. So remember that the muscles can't ever just be isolated as glutes or hips or hamstrings. Everything is all connected. So this is a lovely practice to do if you've been doing lots of glute work, lots of glute exercises. Hopefully you have been watching the other videos, and this will help just kind of ease everything out a little bit. So we're going to start on our hands and knees into a little bit of a tabletop position, and you can just wag the hips a little bit side to side, maybe take a few circles, especially if you're doing this first thing or this is the first movement you've actually done today. Just give yourself a little bit of kind of movement to warm up. So you have two options for our first pose. We're going to either come into Pigeon Pose, right knee towards the outside of the right wrist, right foot comes a little bit more diagonal. This is quite a vulnerable position for the hips, so having to come into a right angle position is quite strong. So even for me, I like to actually bring the foot a little bit closer towards the left hip. You can slide the left leg away, so you're lovely opening into the hip flexor as well. And if you want to have a little bit of rocking here, that can be quite nice. You might decide to come down onto the forearms, maybe even come all the way in if you need a bolster or support. If you want to come down and rest, you can, and just check in with how it's feeling on the right knee. If it feels intense and kind of really sore on that right knee, back away. If this is not a position for you, another option is deer pose. So we can come into this hurdle sort of shape, having the back leg extended behind front leg. Again, still in either that tucked position or a little bit more right angle. This is the most vulnerable shape to make on your hip, and then we're adding load to it. So be very careful and very mindful. And your weight can come over the knee, or it can come over the hip, the shin. And again, if you need to add a bit of movement, you can, or stillness. You're still getting a little bit into that hip flexor as well in the front here, so it can still feel quite nice. But you're taking obviously a lot less pressure on the knee. So just be very aware of what feels right for your body. And we'll breathe here for a couple more breaths, just exploring some of that tightness we might feel in the glute outer hip region. Just noticing if we can let go a little bit here after all the activation we may have been doing for our glute hip region. Let's take one more breath. So wherever we might be, let's roll onto that right hip. And we'll sweep the left leg all the way over, bringing both sit bones to the floor. So I'll show you from the front. You're in a shoelace position. Now, if shoelace is like, can't do that position, or a variation of shoelace, extend the underneath legs. Extend the right leg out in front. If you have got the extended leg out in front, that's great, because we're going to be grounding the left foot down to the floor. Either variation, we want to have that left foot rooted as opposed to stacking the legs into shoelace. Guiding the right arm or hand around the left leg and just tug it gently in towards the center. So we have this pulling in, which creates a lovely stretch on that boomerang area of the left glute. Then we can twist slowly towards the left, maybe even gazing over the left shoulder. And this feels quite nice for opening up into that hip region. If it's a bit clunky on the hip, you can always play with a bit of movement here. We're all designed differently. Our hips are all a little bit different. So, and especially even side to side, we might feel slight differences each side. So just having explore of where you feel that kind of connection. It might need to be a little bit over to the left or a bit more over to the right to get that kind of feeling into the glute space. We want to plug the sit bones down so that we kind of pin so we can stretch. If we lift the bum away from the ground, we're just going to lose the stretch. So just let it be enough. It doesn't have to be super intense for this to be effective. One more breath. So we'll come back to the center. If we're in our full kind of shoelace variation, let's extend that right leg out. Again, we have two options. Option one, we stack left knee directly over right, or we slide ankle over right ankle. We're going to do a little kind of fascial releasing fold. So we're going to tuck the chin to the chest and we're rounding forward. The intention is not to get the chin or the nose to the knee. The intention is to feel the back right line all the way down on that right side, and you can feel it in the hip,
in the back, maybe the neck. So the more you tuck the chin in, the more you're going to feel it down the back line of the neck. And ultimately, maybe you'll get the forehead. It might come down towards the knee, but that's not the goal. For me, I'm feeling really tight today. And actually, this is enough. I'm feeling it down the back of my neck and into my glute and hip area. So just breathing where you are, maybe closing the eyes and just softening. With the leg on top, whether it is the knee or whether we have the foot crossed, we're just adding a bit of weight into that leg underneath, and you'll definitely feel that stretching going on down the back of the leg. A little bit more than if the leg wasn't crossed over. Let's breathe again, a few more breaths here. You can stay in this sort of position for anywhere up to kind of 2 minutes. Just noticing where different areas of the back line, superficial fascia might start to release. It might shift in awareness. You might now feel, I feel it right in the center of my back a little bit more. Good, we'll gently, slowly curl up, really slowly, all the way back up to seated. And we can bring our hands behind us and slide so that the left ankle is on the right thigh. Try not to bring it onto the knee. If this is really hard for your body, you can come down a little bit lower onto the shin, or you can actually lie down onto your back. So you can take the variation where you actually lie on your back. We're going to bend into the right knee so that we have a figure 4 position, but you're leaning into the hands. This just intensifies a little bit. If you want to rock a bit side to side, you can. Now remember, this feels too strong. You're like, I can't even get my leg there. Lie down and do the figure 4 position lying on your back. You can always draw it in if that feels nice. I quite like the seated variation, as I have a little bit more control of how much intensity I want to take. Again, the foot can come further away. You can always get a little bit of a rock and just feel into the edges of the hips as well. Try and keep that left foot flexed just to support the knee. So it's not about how far the knee can open, but just let it go to where it does open, and then you can move from there. Good, then we'll just slowly drop the feet back down to the floor, maybe cross at the ankles, sweep them behind you, come onto your hands and knees. I'm just going to turn around so I can still show you without my back being to you. We're going to come into pigeon or deer pose. So left knee, left outer wrist, left foot to the inside, coming either towards the hip region or the thigh. Trying to avoid this kind of really strong variation unless you're very, very open. Sliding the right leg away, almost for my left and right then, and coming either onto forearms or onto the chest. Remember, you can add a little bit of rocking if that feels nice. Just feeling into where it's actually stretching, so hopefully into that glute area, hip area of the left leg, and maybe a little bit down the front of the right hip flexor. You can also come into deer pose if this feels too strong, so you can take bending, bringing the weight into the left hip, and then let the right leg stagger. It can be close or it can be as far back as you want it to go, and your weight can come either over the knee or the shin. And again, if little bits of movement are needed, they can be taken or staying still in one variation that you're in. Let's take a few more breaths in either deer or pigeon pose. So we're looking for sensation as opposed to position. So the positioning isn't really that important in terms of how deep you go into the pose, but what can be felt is. So wherever we might be, let's bring the weight into the left hip and we'll sweep that right leg all the way over, grounding the foot over the thigh. Remember, if this is too strong, on this side I'll demonstrate with the foot in, you can always extend the leg out. Yeah? So this isn't better, it's just slightly different. Left arm will wrap around right leg and you can pull it in so you get this lovely stretch down that kind of, what we call in Thai massage, the boomerang area. So a little bit piriformity. And we can twist towards the right, maybe looking over the back shoulder. If you do, again, also want a little bit of movement here, I quite like that. It feels quite nice. Often finding yoga can be like, get into this pose, push and stay there and have to hold it and almost torture yourself. Really what we're looking for is sensation and release. So some kind of movement can be quite encouraging the tissue to soften as opposed to
So just do what works for your body, trust your instincts and trust that you know what feels good for you. Remember, if it feels quite pinchy in kind of the hip joint, play around with the positioning of where the knee needs to be. We're all slightly different. So you might find that this stretch doesn't really get that kind of glutes position because the hip just won't go into that space. Or you may want to play with where you can feel it. Good, well then come back round to the centre, extend the left leg if it's bent, either crossing right knee over, so half shoelace, or right ankle over left ankle. We're going to curl in. So remember that either variation is great because we're just adding load onto that, we're just taking away some of the hip rotation. And we're just allowing the spine to roll inwards. Chin can tuck to the chest as far as it will go. And depending on which pose you're in, you will get closer or not so close to the knee. And now you should be feeling it down the left side, the left edge of the spine, all the way down the left back of the leg. I love these stretches. They're kind of like good bad. So if it feels really, really strong, back away a little bit. Round a bit more maybe in certain areas. If it's so uncomfortable that you really can't breathe, or you feel like, oh my gosh, this is just too much for my body, you've probably gone in too quick, too fast. So if your body starts to tense up, the fascia, the connective tissue, isn't going to then relax and allow it to stretch. So create an element of safety in your body, and then the magic starts to happen. Things start to shift and let go. Even my stomach is making funny noises now. Let's take a couple more breaths. You can always stay here for more time if you need to. So we'll gently, really slowly come out of these poses, nice and slow. We'll lift the head back up, hands can come behind you. Bend the left knee and bring the right ankle to the left thigh. If this is too hard, come onto the back and do the figure 4 position lying down. I love this variation just to then move it around a little bit. So you can move side to side. A little bit of a release. Wiggling on the bum. Good. And then we'll release the legs. Come and lie in a little mini Shavasana. Take a moment to rest. Just allow the body to come into a neutral space. Again, you can lie here for as long as you need. And then when you're ready, just moving out slowly. We can come up to seated. And just take a moment to maybe close the eyes, bring the hands to the heart center. And thank yourself for taking just a few minutes out of your day to be with your body. Namaste.